No one at that gas station knew what they were about to witness. Not the officers stepping out of their patrol car. Not the truck driver filling up his rig. Not even the customers walking in and out of the convenience store, going about their business like it was just another Tuesday afternoon. All they knew was this: 2 cops had just approached a black man pumping gas, and within seconds everything escalated, voices raised, hands moving toward weapons, a crowd starting to form, phones coming out, people whispering to each other. But what none of them saw was the silver sedan parked about 30 feet away, engine still running, windows slightly down. Inside that car sat Steven Seagal, watching every single move, not as a celebrity trying to get attention, not as an actor looking for his next role, but as a reserve deputy sheriff who knew exactly what he was witnessing. Someone who'd seen this play out before. Someone who understood the difference between legitimate police work and something else entirely. And when those officers crossed the line, when the situation went from questioning to harassment, Steven didn't pull out his phone to record it. He didn't film for social media. He didn't shout from a distance or try to go viral. He did something that would change that entire confrontation in ways no one standing there could have predicted. Something quiet. Something deliberate. Something that would remind everyone watching that courage doesn't always announce itself with noise. Have you ever watched injustice happen right in front of you, in broad daylight, with witnesses everywhere, and wondered if you'd have the courage to step in? Not just film it, not just share it later, but actually walk into the middle of it and say, "This isn't right." It was a Tuesday afternoon at a truck stop just outside Baton Rouge, the kind of place where long-haul drivers refuel after hours on the interstate, grab coffee that's been sitting too long, stretch their legs before the next 500 miles. Families stopped for snacks on road trips. Locals filled up their tanks on their way home from work, maybe grabbed a lottery ticket or a bag of chips. Everything felt routine, normal, safe. Marcus Johnson, a 43-year-old truck driver from Atlanta, had just pulled his 18-wheeler into the fuel bay. He'd been driving for 19 hours straight, hauling a load of electronics cross-country, tired but focused on getting home by Friday. His wife's birthday was Saturday, and he'd promised her he wouldn't miss it this year. He stepped out of the cab, started the pump, and leaned against the side of his truck, scrolling through text messages from his wife. She was asking what time he'd be home, if he remembered to pick up her gift. Small things, normal things. The sun was bright. The air smelled like diesel and hot asphalt. A few other trucks were parked nearby, their drivers either sleeping in their cabs or inside grabbing food. Across the parking lot, Steven Seagal sat in his car, finishing up a phone call. He'd stopped for gas himself, driving through Louisiana quietly, no entourage, no security detail, no cameras following him around. Just a man traveling alone, keeping to himself. He noticed Marcus immediately, not because of anything unusual, not because something seemed wrong, just habit, years of law enforcement training, that constant awareness of your surroundings. Noticing who's where, what they're doing, how they're moving. 2 patrol cars pulled into the lot. Steven watched them park near the convenience store entrance. 4 officers got out, casually at first, laughing about something, coffee cups in their hands, looking relaxed. Then one of them noticed Marcus. The shift was subtle. A glance, a tilt of the head, a word to his partner. Then all 4 officers stopped what they were doing and started walking toward the fuel bay where Marcus stood. Steven's posture changed slightly. He ended his phone call, put his phone down on the passenger seat. His eyes stayed on the officers. Something felt off, not obvious, not dramatic. Just that quiet instinct you develop when you've been around law enforcement long enough to know the difference between routine and something else. Marcus hadn't noticed them yet. He was still looking at his phone, typing out a reply to his wife, completely unaware that 4 officers were walking directly toward him, with a purpose that didn't match the calm afternoon around them. Moments like this are dangerous because they feel safe. Most confrontations don't start with violence or chaos. They start with comfort, with noise, with people not paying attention to what's happening right in front of them, until it's already too late to stop it. The first officer approached Marcus with his hand resting on his belt, right near his weapon. "Afternoon. This your truck?" Marcus looked up from his phone. "Surprise, sir. Just fueling up. License and registration." Marcus frowned slightly, glancing at the other 3 officers who were now positioning themselves around his truck. "Is there a problem, officer? I asked you a question. The tone had already shifted. Cold, demanding no explanation, no courtesy. Marcus kept his voice calm, respectful. Sure, my license is in the truck. Registration's in the cab. I'll grab it for you. Don't move. Marcus froze, his hand halfway to the truck door. The second officer circled around to the other side of the truck, looking through the windows. The third stood by the fuel pump, blocking any path Marcus might take away from the vehicle. The fourth stayed near the entrance of the lot, watching, arms crossed. We got a call about a suspicious vehicle matching this description, the first officer said. Possible stolen cargo. Marcus's stomach dropped. Stolen? Officer? I've been hauling this load for 2 days straight. I have all my paperwork, my bills of lading, everything's legitimate. Then you won't mind if we take a look inside. Do you have a warrant? The officer's jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. You refusing to cooperate. I'm not refusing anything. I'm just asking if you have legal grounds to search my truck. That's when the energy changed completely. The officer stepped closer, invading Marcus's space, his voice dropping lower. You want to make this difficult? A small crowd had started forming. A couple filling up their SUV at the next pump, watching nervously. A teenager near the convenience store entrance, phone already out, recording. An older woman standing by the store entrance, frozen, her hand over her mouth. Steven sat forward in his car, his hand moving to the door handle. Marcus raised his hand slightly, trying to de-escalate, trying to show he wasn't a threat. I'm not making anything difficult. I just want to know why I'm being stopped. I haven't done anything wrong. Step away from the vehicle. Officer, please, if you could just tell me what this is about. Steep, a WAY. Marcus complied immediately, moving slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands visible at all times, because he knew one wrong move could change everything. The second officer opened the truck's cab door without permission, without consent, climbing inside and starting to search through Marcus's belongings. A bystander, the woman near the store, shouted out, "Hey, does he have to let them do that?" The first officer turned toward her, his voice sharp. "Ma'am, step back or you'll be detained too." She backed away quickly, fear flashing across her face, but the phone recordings didn't stop. More people were filming now. The teenager, the couple at the next pump, someone inside a parked car. Steven opened his car door. Marcus stood there with his hands raised, his heart pounding, trying to stay calm, trying to remember everything he'd been taught about surviving encounters like this. Don't argue. Don't resist. Stay polite. Keep your hands visible. Don't give them a reason. But inside he was terrified, because he'd done this before, been stopped before, questioned before. And every single time, no matter how polite he was, no matter how much he cooperated, it always felt like he was one wrong word away from disaster. The second officer was tearing through his cab now, opening compartments, tossing paperwork onto the seat, pulling out his logbook, his personal belongings, looking for anything they could use against him. The third officer walked around the trailer, checking the locks, peering underneath. Marcus's voice shook slightly. "Officer, I really need to know what this is about. I'm just trying to get home to my family." The first officer ignored him completely, speaking into his radio instead. "Yeah, we've got a subject here. 18-wheeler. Running a check now. Have you ever seen someone treated unfairly by people in authority and felt completely powerless to stop it? Knowing that if you say something, you might make it worse. But if you say nothing, you're letting it happen." Steven stood by his car, 30 feet away, watching every move. He knew what this was. He'd seen it before, too many times to count. Profiling disguised as procedure, aggression masked as authority. Officers using their power not to protect and serve but to intimidate and control. And he knew something else too. If he walked over there right now, it could go one of two ways. It could help Marcus de-escalate the situation. Remind those officers that they were being watched, that their actions had consequences. Or it could make everything worse, escalate the tension, turn a bad situation into something dangerous. He wasn't in uniform. He had no jurisdiction here in Baton Rouge. Technically, legally, he was just a civilian. Another person with a phone and an opinion. But he also knew the law better than most people standing in that parking lot. He knew officer protocols. He knew what constituted reasonable suspicion and what didn't. He knew when someone's constitutional rights were being violated. And he knew, watching Marcus stand there with his hands raised, doing everything right, saying all the right things, staying calm under pressure most people couldn't imagine, that this was wrong. Marcus stood perfectly still, breathing carefully. his chest rising and falling in controlled breaths, doing everything he'd been taught to survive moments like this. The officers were still tearing through his cab now, opening every compartment, every storage space, tossing his paperwork around like it meant nothing, looking for anything they could twist into probable cause, any excuse to justify what they were already doing. Steven made his decision. He didn't rush, didn't shout, didn't storm over there like some action hero looking for a fight. He walked slowly toward the scene, his hands visible at his sides, his posture calm and non-threatening, every movement deliberate. "Excuse me, officers." All four of them turned at once. The first officer's expression hardened immediately, his body language shifting from focused to defensive. "Sir, step back. This is official business." Steven stopped at a respectful distance, not challenging them, not invading their space. "I understand. I'm Steven Seagal. I'm a reserve deputy sheriff with Jefferson Parish. Can I ask what the basis for this stop is?" Silence. Complete silence. The kind of silence that happens when someone asks a question everyone heard, but no one wants to answer. The lead officer's face tightened, his jaw clenching. "This doesn't concern you." Steven kept his voice steady, calm, professional. "It does if you're conducting an unlawful search." The air changed again. The crowd grew larger. More phones came out. People stopped what they were doing and started paying attention, because something was happening now, something they knew mattered. Power doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it walks up quietly and asks a single question that changes everything. What would you do in that moment? Would you keep walking, mind your own business? Or would you step in, knowing it might put you in the crosshairs too? The atmosphere shifted instantly. The officers exchanged glances with each other, quick looks that said they knew this had just become more complicated. The crowd grew larger, people moving closer now, sensing something important was happening. Phones came out everywhere, from pockets, from purses, held up high to capture every angle. The lead officer stepped toward Steven, his boots heavy on the pavement. "With all due respect, sir, you're not a sworn officer in this jurisdiction. You need to leave." Steven didn't move, didn't step back, didn't flinch. "I'm an observer, and I'm asking a legal question. What was your probable cause for this stop?" "We received a report." "What kind of report?" "That's not your concern. If you're searching his vehicle without consent or a warrant, it absolutely is my concern." Marcus's eyes widened. He hadn't said a word, too afraid to speak, too afraid to do anything that might make this worse. But relief flickered across his face, just for a second, because someone was finally standing up for him. The second officer climbed out of the truck cab, empty-handed, his search turning up nothing. "There's nothing here." The lead officer ignored him completely, his focus locked on Steven. "Sir, I'm asking you one more time to step away from this scene." Steven remained calm, his voice steady and clear. "And I'm asking you, officer, to explain your legal basis for this detention. Because from where I'm standing, this looks like harassment." The word hung in the air like smoke. Harassment. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt the weight of it. The lead officer's jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscles working in his face. "You calling me a racist?" "I'm calling this an unlawful stop." Tension crackled through the parking lot like electricity. Bystanders whispered to each other. Someone in the crowd shouted,
"He's right. They can't just do that."
The officer took another step closer to Steven, his voice dropping lower, more aggressive. "You think because you're famous, you can interfere with an active investigation?" Steven didn't blink, didn't back down. "I think because I'm trained in law enforcement, I can recognize when someone's constitutional rights are being violated." "We had reasonable suspicion." "Based on what?" "His truck, the color of his skin. Or did you actually receive a credible report with specific details that matched this vehicle?" Silence again. That damning silence that said everything without saying anything at all. The officer's hand moved toward his radio, his fingers hovering near the button. "Dispatch, we need a supervisor at—" "Good," Steven interrupted calmly. "Let's get a supervisor here. Let's review the body cam footage. Let's see exactly what reasonable suspicion you had to stop this man." The officer froze. His hand stayed on the radio, but he didn't press the button. Didn't make the call. Because they both knew what would happen if a supervisor showed up and reviewed the footage. They both knew what it would show. Marcus finally spoke, his voice shaking slightly but clear. "I've been driving trucks for 19 years. Clean record, no violations, no tickets, no arrests. I just wanted to get home to my family for my wife's birthday." The crowd murmured in support, voices rising, people saying, "That's right," and "Leave him alone," and "This is wrong." The third officer, younger than the others, quieter, finally spoke up. "Mike, maybe we should just let him go." The lead officer, Mike, turned on him sharply. "Excuse me." The younger officer swallowed hard but continued. "There's nothing here. We didn't find anything." And he glanced at all the cameras pointed at them, at all the people recording. "This doesn't look good." Mike's face flushed red. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "I'm saying we made a mistake." "We don't make mistakes." "Then what do you call this?" The tension between the officers themselves was visible now, cracks forming in their united front, doubt creeping in. The fourth officer, who had been silent this entire time, standing off to the side just watching, suddenly stepped forward. Seagal's right. Everyone turned to look at him. He pulled out his phone, checking something, then looked up at Mike. "I just reviewed the call log. The report we got was for a white panel van, not an 18-wheeler. We stopped the wrong vehicle." The lead officer's face went pale. All the blood drained from it in an instant as the reality hit him. They didn't just make a mistake. They made a mistake on camera, in front of dozens of witnesses, while harassing an innocent man who had done absolutely nothing wrong. Steven's voice cut through the silence, quiet but carrying weight. "So you stopped this man based on a description that didn't even match his vehicle?" No response. "And then you conducted a warrantless search without probable cause?" "Still nothing." "Officer, this isn't just a mistake. This is a civil rights violation." Marcus's hands were still raised, still in the air where they'd been this entire time, his arms starting to shake from holding them up for so long. "Can I please put my hands down now?" Steven turned to him, his voice gentle. "Yes, sir. You're free to go. You've done nothing wrong." The lead officer's voice cracked slightly, desperation creeping in. "We're not done here?" "Yes, you are," Steven said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Unless you want to detain him on actual criminal charges, which we both know you don't have, this man is free to leave." The younger officer had already started walking back toward the patrol car, distancing himself from the situation. Mike stood there, caught between his pride and reality, knowing he'd been beaten but not wanting to admit it. The supervisor's voice crackled over the radio, distant but clear. "Unit 47, what's your status? Do you need backup?" Mike grabbed his radio, his hand shaking slightly. We're clearing the scene. Is there an incident report I need to be aware of?" A long, painful pause. "Negative. False. If you were standing there with your phone out, recording this entire thing, would you post it immediately? Or would you wait to see how it ends?" The silence was deafening. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring, that makes every small sound seem too loud, that makes everyone hold their breath waiting for what happens next. The lead officer stared at his colleague, who'd just exposed the truth. Fury and embarrassment mixing on his face, his jaw working like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Steven spoke quietly, but his voice carried across the entire parking lot. "So you stopped this man based on a description that didn't even match his vehicle?" No response. Just Mike standing there, fists clenched at his sides, and then you conducted a search without probable cause, without a warrant, without his consent. Still nothing. "Officer, this isn't just a mistake. This is a violation of his Fourth Amendment rights." Marcus's hands were still trembling even though he'd finally lowered them. His whole body was shaking now, adrenaline and fear and relief all crashing together. "Can I please just put my hands down now?" Steven turned to him, his expression softening. "Yes, sir. You're free to go. You can lower your hands. You've done nothing wrong." The lead officer's voice cracked, desperate now. "We're not done here." "Yes, you are," Steven said firmly, his tone shifting from calm to absolutely final. "Unless you want to formally detain him on actual criminal charges, which we both know you don't have, this man is free to leave. He's been cooperative. He's answered your questions. And you've found nothing because there's nothing to find." The younger officer had already stepped back toward the patrol car, creating distance between himself and Mike. The supervisor's voice crackled over the radio again, more insistent this time. "Unit 47, what's your status out there?" Mike grabbed his radio with a shaking hand. "We're clearing the scene. Situation resolved. Is there an incident report?" Long pause. "Negative." "False alarm. Copy that." Steven looked at Marcus, really looked at him, seeing the exhaustion and fear and anger in his eyes. "Do you want to file a formal complaint?" Marcus hesitated, his eyes darting between Steven, the officers, and the crowd of people still recording everything. He glanced at the 4 officers, especially Mike, who was staring at him with barely contained rage. Then back at Steven. His voice was quiet but steady when he finally spoke. "I just want to go home to my family." Steven nodded slowly, understanding. "That's your right. No one can force you to file anything. But if you change your mind, even tomorrow, even next week, I'll be a witness to everything that happened here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Marcus. His contact information, his badge number, everything Marcus would need if he decided later that he wanted justice. Marcus took it with trembling hands.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
"You don't need to thank me. You handled this exactly right. You stayed calm under pressure most people couldn't imagine." The officers started walking back toward their patrol cars, slowly, reluctantly, knowing they'd been caught, knowing this was going to follow them. But before they could leave, before they could just drive away like nothing happened, Steven called out, "Officer." The lead officer stopped mid-step, his back still turned. Slowly, reluctantly, he turned around. Steven's voice was calm, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that comes from years of experience, from authority earned rather than just given. "You had a chance to do the right thing today. Multiple chances. You chose intimidation instead. That's not law enforcement. That's abuse of power." The officer's face reddened, his hands clenching into fists, but he didn't respond, couldn't respond. Not with all these cameras on him. Steven continued, his words measured and deliberate. "There are good officers out there who risk their lives every single day to protect people. Officers who do their jobs with integrity and respect. You just made their job harder. You just gave people another reason not to trust the badge." The crowd was completely silent now. Even the younger officer looked down at his feet, shame written across his face. "Next time you stop someone," Steven said, each word landing with precision, "ask yourself one question. Am I doing this because of evidence, because of actual reasonable suspicion based on facts? Or am I doing this because of an assumption, because of what someone looks like, because of bias I haven't examined?" The lead officer stood there for another moment, jaw working, wanting to say something, wanting to defend himself, but knowing anything he said would only make it worse. Finally, he turned and climbed into his patrol car without another word. The 4 vehicles pulled away slowly, no sirens, no lights, just driving off like they were retreating from a battle they'd lost. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, not in celebration, but in that collective release of tension, voices rising, people talking over each other, some clapping, others just exhaling deeply because they'd been holding their breath. Marcus stood there, completely overwhelmed, tears suddenly streaming down his face. "I thought this was going to end differently. I really thought." He couldn't finish the sentence. Steven placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but gentle. "You did everything right. You stayed calm when most people would have panicked. You knew your rights. You didn't escalate. That took real courage. I was terrified the entire time. That's what courage is. Doing the right thing even when you're scared. Even when every instinct is telling you to run or fight or break down." A woman from the crowd approached them, her phone still in her hand. "I got the whole thing on video, every single second. I'll send it to you if you want it, for evidence." Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes. "Yes, please. Thank you." Another man stepped forward, an older guy in a trucker's cap, his own rig parked a few spaces down. "Brother, I've had that exact same thing happen to me 3 times in the last 5 years. 3 times. You handled it way better than I ever did." More people started gathering around, offering support, sharing their own stories, creating this spontaneous community of people who'd witnessed injustice and wanted Marcus to know he wasn't alone. A teenager, maybe 16 or 17, looked at Steven with wide eyes full of admiration. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen in real life." Steven shook his head gently. "The bravest person here is Marcus. He stood his ground without losing his composure. He knew his rights. He protected himself without violence. That's real strength. If you saw something like this happen in front of you, would you have the courage to step in? Or would you stay back, filming from a safe distance, hoping someone else does something?" An hour later, just as Marcus was finally preparing to leave, finally getting back into his truck to continue his journey home, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot, government plates. 2 men in plain clothes stepped out, badges hanging from their belts. Internal affairs investigators. Marcus's heart sank immediately. that familiar fear rushing back. Am I in trouble? The lead investigator, a tall woman with gray hair pulled back tight, shook her head. No, sir. You're not in any trouble at all. Those officers are. We've received multiple witness reports and video footage from this incident. We're opening a formal investigation into their conduct. Steven walked over from where he'd been standing. I'm willing to provide a full written statement and testify if necessary. The investigator recognized him immediately, her expression shifting to something like relief. Mr. Seagal, your testimony would be extremely valuable. We take incidents like this very seriously, especially when they involve potential civil rights violations. Then you'll have everything you need from me. She turned back to Marcus, her voice softer now. Sir, what happened to you today was completely unacceptable. It violated department policy and your constitutional rights. We will be conducting a thorough investigation. Marcus nodded, still processing everything, still trying to believe this was actually happening. Okay, we'll be in touch within 48 hours to get your full statement. For now, you're free to continue your route. Again, we're very sorry for what you experienced. As the investigators walked back to their SUV, as the crowd finally started to disperse, as the adrenaline slowly drained away, Marcus turned to Steven one last time. Why did you help me? You didn't know me. You could have just driven away. Steven met his eyes, and his answer was simple, direct, honest. Because it was the right thing to do. That's the only reason anyone ever needs. Real courage isn't about fighting. It's about standing between someone vulnerable and someone powerful and refusing to move until justice is done. By that evening, the footage had spread across the internet like wildfire. Not just one video, not just one angle. Dozens of them, different perspectives, different phones, different witnesses, all showing the same thing from slightly different vantage points. A black truck driver stopped for no legitimate reason, officers conducting an unlawful search, and a Hollywood actor who refused to stay silent when he saw injustice happening right in front of him. The comments poured in by the thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. Tay-Chise is what an ally looks like. Not performative, not for likes, actually stepping into danger. Steven Seagal just became a real-life hero. Not the movies. Real life. I've had this exact thing happen to me, twice. Thank God someone finally stood up. That truck driver stayed so calm, I would have lost it. News outlets picked it up within hours. Local stations first, then national networks, then international media. Civil rights organizations shared it across all their platforms. Law enforcement accountability groups used it as a teaching moment. It went viral in the true sense of the word, spreading everywhere, unstoppable. The Baton Rouge Police Department was forced to respond publicly. The two officers involved, Mike and his partner who'd conducted the search, were placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. The department issued a carefully worded statement that appeared on their website and social media. We are reviewing the incident that occurred on Tuesday afternoon and take all allegations of misconduct with the utmost seriousness. Our officers are expected to uphold the highest standards of professionalism, integrity, and respect for the constitutional rights of all citizens. A thorough investigation is underway, but the real impact wasn't in the headlines or the news coverage or the official statements. It was in Marcus's phone, hundreds of messages from complete strangers, thousands eventually, offers of support from people he'd never met, fellow truck drivers sharing their own stories of being stopped, searched, humiliated, people thanking him for his composure, for representing them with dignity, lawyers offering pro bono representation if he wanted to pursue legal action, activists asking if he'd speak at events. One message stood out above all the others. It was from his 12-year-old daughter. Dad, I saw the video at school. Everyone was talking about it. I'm so proud of you. You were so brave. I love you. Marcus stared at those words for a long time, sitting in his truck at a rest stop somewhere in Mississippi, tears blurring his vision. He thought about all the times over the years he'd bitten his tongue. All the times he'd smiled through disrespect, swallowed his anger, drove away humiliated and furious and afraid. All the times he'd been stopped for no reason, questioned like a criminal, treated like he didn't belong on roads he'd been driving for 2 decades. All the times he'd come home angry, and his wife had held him while he vented, while he raged about the unfairness of it, about how exhausting it was to always have to be twice as calm, twice as polite, twice as perfect just to survive encounters that white drivers never even worried about. But this time was different. This time, someone stood with him. This time, someone with power used that power to protect instead of to dominate, and that changed everything. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a phone call from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Johnson. This is Chief Daniels from the Baton Rouge Police Department. Marcus's stomach immediately tightened, that instinctive fear response kicking in. I want to apologize to you personally for what happened. What those officers did was unacceptable, unprofessional, and a violation of your rights and our department's values. Marcus didn't know what to say. An actual apology from the chief of police. The 2 officers directly involved have been terminated from the department. They will not be serving in law enforcement in this city again. Okay, Marcus managed. There's something else I'd like to discuss with you if you're open to it. We're implementing new training protocols department-wide to prevent incidents like this from happening again. Implicit bias training, de-escalation techniques, constitutional rights education, and we'd like to invite you to speak at our next community forum, to share your perspective, to help us understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end of this kind of treatment, to help us do better. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing. You want me to speak to police officers, if you're willing. Your voice matters, Mr. Johnson. Your experience matters. And frankly, our officers need to hear it directly from someone who lived through what you did. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt something other than fear or anger when thinking about that day. He felt something like hope. I'll do it. The forum took place a month later in a community center packed with people. Officers in uniform filled half the room. Community leaders, activists, residents, and families filled the other half. News cameras lined the back wall. The tension was visible, palpable, everyone wondering how this would go. Marcus stood at the podium, more nervous than he'd been even during the actual incident, his prepared notes shaking in his hands. I don't hate police. He began, his voice quiet but clear through the microphone. My uncle was a cop in Detroit for 23 years. Good man, honest man, saved lives. Risked his own life to protect people he'd never met. The room listened in complete silence. But that day at the gas station, I wasn't treated like a citizen. I wasn't treated like someone who deserved respect or dignity, or the presumption of innocence. I was treated like a suspect from the moment those officers saw me, not because of anything I did, not because of any evidence or probable cause, but because of what I looked like. He paused, looking out at the faces watching him, some sympathetic, some skeptical, some ashamed. I followed every instruction. I stayed calm even though I was terrified inside. I was respectful even though I was being disrespected. I knew my rights, but I didn't push back aggressively, because I know what can happen when black men push back. And still, I was humiliated in front of strangers, searched without cause, treated like a criminal for the crime of existing while black. Several people in the audience nodded. A few officers looked down at their hands. But here's what I learned that day, and it's important. Courage doesn't just come from the person being harassed. It comes from the people willing to stand up and say this is wrong. This has to stop. His voice grew stronger now, more confident. Steven Seagal didn't have to help me. He could have driven away, could have filmed it and posted it later, could have minded his own business like most people do. But he didn't. He used his voice, his knowledge, his presence, his privilege, and it made all the difference between that day ending badly and ending with justice. The room was absolutely silent, so I'm asking all of you, everyone in this room, officers and civilians alike, when you see injustice, don't look away, don't stay silent, don't tell yourself it's not your problem. Stand up, speak out, because someone's life, someone's safety, someone's dignity might depend on your courage in that moment. The room erupted in applause that went on for minutes, people standing, officers and community members alike recognizing the truth in his words.